We are here on CAN TV. I'm LaShawn Ford. This is F.D.R. Community Housing Foundation. And here we also have
Malika Gardner
and our host, Reuben Fellows, who's in the on the Zoom. So we're going to get right to it. We got a serious issue in the world. You know, we have a serious issue in the United States, but we also have to focus close to home. And recently, the New York Times penned a editorial, and it stated that many homeowners are paying a total of billions of dollars extra because of inequities in assessing property values. It goes on to say Americans expect to pay property taxes at the same rates as their neighbors, but across most of the United States, flat rate property taxation is a sham. Local governments are failing at the basic task of accurately assessing property values, and there is a clear and stark pattern. More expensive properties are undervalued, while less expensive properties are overvalued. The result of that is wealthy homeowners get a big tax break, while less affluent homeowners are paying a higher price for the same public services. We have guests here, experts here. We'd like to get right to them. And we'll go right to the tax doctor with your opening remarks. And then we'll go to Phil and John. Go right ahead. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me. If I can put my finger on one thing, it would be the Constitutional Convention that we had in 1970 that have helped us, well, let me put it this way, it helped create this mess. Because before the convention, everything was done by personal property taxes. So that means if you had a cow, that's how you paid your taxes, okay? And that was shifted because the business community was tired of waiting on Springfield to fix that situation. And so the business community went to court, and then the courts told Springfield that this got to change. So the Supreme Court liquidated the personal property taxes and told Springfield, you guys got to come up with a better way to pay for municipalities, for schools, and all of that stuff. And so Daley, who was a major component of getting home rule put in, and by him getting home rule, they cut a deal to allow them to have property taxes. Now, when you look at the Constitution, Article 9, Section 1, the only body that have power to raise revenue is Springfield. But we was hoodwinked because Daley got home rule and he got the authority to tax.
All right, that's a good point. Please, yeah, that's good. Thank you. Let's go right to Phil. Phil Griffin.
Representative Ford, Gardner. Nice to be on the show with you guys tonight. You know, I'm a community activist in our area, and I work with Representative Ford in our 8th District Tax Fairness Task Force. And what we're interested in understanding is really, you know, why are there inequities, unfairness, and, you know, at the end of the day, such high levels of inaffordability in our property tax system. We've been studying this issue with the most recent set of assessments that have come out in tax year 2020 in Representative Ford's district and in the south and west suburbs. And we are struck by the level of regressiveness that is present in property taxes today. It seems to us that really nothing has changed since the last triennial reassessment of this area. which is unfortunate. We feel like there's a lot of big problems here, and we've seen it in the data. And we're looking forward to. I'm looking forward to hashing out here tonight.
Yeah, and we have John.
John Sullivan.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me here tonight. I was one of the 3 chiefs of staff of the Cook County Board of Review, which is the last place you can appeal your property taxes before going to circuit court in Cook County. I was there for 3 years, back from 2008 through 2010. And I can tell you, the fundamental problem with the property tax in Illinois, and specifically Chicago and Cook County, is its regressive nature. We have been and continue to be over-reliant on the property tax. Because of the way the system's set up, it adversely impacts poor and minority communities much more than it does the wealthy and affluent. There's been an attempt to shift that burden to the income tax, most recently trying to go to a progressive income tax and reduce some of the property tax burden. Those efforts continue to fail, and for that reason, you see this overtaxation of folks that can't or don't use the resources of the Cook County Board of Review and the Assessor's Office to appeal their taxes. And I can tell you that every business, every high-rise in Chicago comes in every single year to get their reductions. And frankly, most hardworking people who are working every day don't have time to figure out what is an arcane system in Cook County so that they can go in and appeal their taxes and get them to the right rate.
Right.
And even when they do, when the larger buildings are appealing their taxes and lowering those taxes, ultimately that burden is getting shifted on to the homeowners throughout Cook County. It's a system that just fundamentally has to change.
Yeah, I know, Reven Fellows, I know you may have questions, and Malika, I have a few questions here. You have questions for our guests?
Oh, yes. Well, I'm in Evanston, so I hear what you're talking about all the time in Evanston, and most people don't have the money to appeal. They don't have the time, the money to go in and fight it. One of the things a lot of people are concerned about are how Tiffs impact property taxes. It's a huge complaint in Evanston. I mean, it's huge. It's a heated topic right now. We're trying to avoid Tiffs in residential areas because we know eventually it's going to raise property taxes. What are your thoughts to that?
I would say probably the past 10, 15 years, TIF has been a problem. And we was relying on Springfield to fix the problem. And I remember I was at one meeting with Pat Dow over on the south side, and we was told, and I still find it hard to believe how you can have 50 wards and you make all wards contiguous so you can take money from the south side and send it way up north. But Chicago found a way to do it. And we're still waiting on Springfield because Springfield have to fix the TIF problem.
So that leads me to the question. So the overall property tax, I guess, system that's cheating working class families, is this a Springfield problem, public policy, or is this a administrative problem in the assessor's office?
It is a Springfield problem based on the history of what takes you back to the convention.
Oh, that's good.
Most folks have not studied the convention. And that's
We won't be able to go through the convention tonight.
Right.
You say it's a Springfield problem because of what?
Yes.
Because we need to change laws. What do you say, John?
I'd say it's both. I'd say, frankly, Springfield needs to make a fundamental change to shift away from the property tax here in Illinois, but also, more immediately, Cook County can and the city of Chicago can do a better job of making sure that assessments are fair. And I think the assessor has made some attempts, but when you have, frankly, you have a layer above the assessor at the Cook County Board of Review that can totally disregard what the assessor's done, and the assessor can totally disregard what the Board of Review has done, creates chaos. And ultimately, in that chaos, when you have a lawyer, of which I was a property tax lawyer for a while, you're just going to reap the benefits of that. Just flat out, if you're not in appealing every single year, you're going to lose. And until that changes, until we solidify and change the appeal system in Cook County, you're going to see hardworking middle class and poor communities take the brunt end of that stick every time.
So are you saying, what do you say, Phil? Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree with John. I think there's two solutions needed. The first solution is the assessor needs better data. We have cases of high value homes that are assessed at half of the value of their property. So like $1 million house that sold is assessed at maybe $400,000. This is a large amount of taxes that are not being paid by this individual or this homeowner that are being picked up by everybody else. And the reason this is happening in part is because the data that the assessor has for these types of homes is not correct. So there's bad data. They also don't know condition. So like within, for example, the city of Berwyn, there's homes that will sell from anywhere between $100,000 and $550,000 in 2020. And these same homes are assessed within a very narrow range of from $150,000 to $200,000 about. So they're not capturing the market.
Yeah, so the same article, the op-ed or the editorial piece said, for example, in Cook County in Illinois, which includes Chicago, there were 1,015 homes were sold for exactly $100,000 between the time period. The average assessed value before the sale was $151,585. During the same period, 149 homes sold for exactly $1 million. The average pre-sale assessed value was $647,000. So we're seeing people that own more expensive houses having their property values assessed lower than people that own less expensive houses. Whose fault is that?
Well, it's the system's fault, because you have to understand the assessor, no matter which of the 102 counties they come from, they can do anything they want to.
I'm sorry, say that again.
The assessor can do anything they want to when it comes to assessing your property. Okay, we had an assessor to come to one of the legislative hearings we had down in Cole County. He did a 3-year study on assessors and found out you had some assessors who was not charging their friends property taxes.
Wow.
Okay, because they have that authority, and the courts can't do nothing to them because they're protected by qualified immunity.
Okay. All right.
And that is a serious problem. And racism is another issue. Again, we found that out with Joe Barrio.
How do we?
I would say regarding
there's got to be a way to
racism
break
in the
that.
system, it's important to note that in Cook County, assessments are made by a computer program. So individuals aren't, certainly they're like checking exterior condition, but all of these properties are assessed by a huge, by a computer, which is programmed by data scientists. So the racism that might be present is in the case of Cook County is certainly would be of a systemic nature rather than an individual making specific choices, I would say.
Well, you got to look at the fact that when Joe Barrios was there, Jason Grotto, Dr. Christopher Berry from the University of Chicago, under the tax buy, showed us how Joe Barrios ripped off $2.2 billion.
So let's answer that. Let's ask that questions directly from any of our panelists. Does the assessor have the ability to control who pays what? Or is it basically the system that he's using? You say yes.
I would say yes.
All right.
Because the tax divide approved that.
Okay, and
Well, yeah, I would say the problem is, right, the computer systems do set an initial assessment, but the process doesn't end there, right? And then it goes into appeals. And not just one area of appeal, it goes, the assessor, you can appeal at the assessor's office, then you can go to the board of review and appeal. And then you can go to the Property Tax Appeal Board for the state of Illinois or to the Cook County Circuit Court. And so what happens—
Or you can go down to Springfield.
Right. And so what happens is, right, businesses and wealthy folks keep appealing at every level with the assessor. So naturally, theirs keep deflating, and the money has to come from somewhere. So everybody else has to pay incrementally more throughout the system. And that's when you have 4 levels of appeal,
Yep.
you just can't control it. And you'll see the circuit court will make multi-million-dollar reductions on buildings that ultimately come out of the pockets of our schools, right? Our schools have to write the checks then to refund those taxes. That's what happens. So you'll see the school districts who are already saddled. They will hire some lawyers that will take an occasional case where they'll try and defend it. But for the most part, these things go largely undefended. And the big corporations, the big buildings, the wealthy continue to win, and that burden gets shifted on the poor, lower income neighborhoods.
That
John,
happens.
to that point,
that happens a lot on the
sorry,
North Shore.
we have some, data on that. So, like in Palos Township, in Proviso Township, in 2020, the lowest 10% of valued homes that sold typically filed an appeal only 10% of the time. The highest valued typically filed for an appeal between 30 and 40% of the time. And then, fewer applied to the Board of Review. And of course, I'm talking about homeowners' residential properties here. But in River Forest, 45% of all property owners appeal. In Bellwood, 8% of property owners appealed.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell one quick story. When I went into private practice, I had a homeowner from Fort Heights, which is one of the poorest communities in the country, came into my office, and he had just bought a house for $20,000 in Fort Heights, and he came in with a property tax bill for $5,000. $5,000 a year on a $20,000 home. I mean, that's absurd, right? And he asked me for my advice, and my advice was don't pay it, right? No tax buyer is going to come in and pay $5,000 for a house or a tax that's for a house that's worth $20,000. And that's the system we've created, right? I mean, that's an extreme example, but that's where we're at, and that's where we continue to be at in Cook County, in Chicago.
I think a lot of people aren't aware, because on the North Shore, the beautiful homes on the lakefront, they're paying lower property tax than those further in, especially in the Black community, and they just don't know. They're uninformed.
right?
That's
Do they really believe? Because we have this progressive tax, flat tax. People, we wanted a progressive tax in Illinois so that the tax rate is fair. It failed as a referendum. So I see the property tax being the same as our tax system in Illinois, where those that make more pay less. Is that the same system? And then we force our taxpayers, homeowners, and communities to deal with more regressive taxes like fines and fees to make up for the loss of revenue, because we're not really gaining the revenue that we need from the property owners.
Well, if we're talking about solutions,
yes,
and once again, I think the gracious of God that Reuben and I had an opportunity to serve on the governor's task force for property tax relief, along with you and Representative Mary Flowers. And out of that came 2 reports, the Democratic report and our subcommittee report, 62 pages. And both reports reflect some of the same things, that we need to get the schools off the property tax system. That's number one. We need to consolidate these school districts.
Yeah. Now, tax doctor, I think you're right. I don't want to cut you off, but what we really need to get, I'm concerned that we had a assessor that ran against Joe Barrios, saying that he exposed the racism in the system. Is he doing the work that we expected him to do. What do you say, Reven, or Phil or John? Is he doing the best that he could do?
I'll chime in and Tax Doctor can follow me. Well, during our study and our study specific is around race, but when Joe Barrios, I mean not Joe Barrios, but Fitz Cagey, he toured the black community specifically to get us on board with the racism and property taxes. And when it was all said and done, Brother Tax Doctor, Winnetka and other areas end up getting tax breaks, as they say, people with money can continue. But Tax Doctor, what happened in Winnetka that was similar that after he did a tour and raised and lowered their taxes in Winnetka or rich community?
He tried to use the flood report.
So let our listeners, let the viewers understand what you're saying. So there was a reassessment in Winnetka, and there
under the flood plan. Now, the assessor went up north, and after he closed them out.
Wait, nobody knows what it means to close out.
Okay, what that means is.
And you might want to explain Winnetka for just a second.
Yeah, Winnetka is a very rich community, and they were using that floodplain, I guess, dealing with displays, and the assessor felt like he could capitalize by giving them a tax break using the floodplain.
So, the question is he doing the job that he said he would do?
I was in the beginning, when we had the hearing with you, I would say no.
So the assessor right now could do better. He's not doing what he ran on. That's what I need us to answer, because we can't go into long dialogues.
I would say.
So I can say definitely not.
Okay.
So in our study of 20, so what we did is with Rep Ford obviously is very well aware of this. We looked at 20. So what's important is that we all each individual town pays taxes together. So like the city of Chicago all shares the tax burden, or my village of LaGrange Park shares the tax burden. So what we did is we looked at about 20 towns that are in and near the 8th district. We looked at 9 townships, and what we did is we compared the sale price of a home, and then we looked up its assessed value. These should be relatively similar regardless of the sale price. And if those values are not relatively similar regardless of the sale price, you get this regressivity. What we found is that in 2 of 9 townships, they have met standards. In 1 of 20 towns, they have met standards for regressivity. What it looks like in comparison to 2017 is it looks exactly the same.
It looks the same.
Regressivity is exactly the same. In 6 of 9 townships, it's gotten worse.
Yeah, I'll just to chime in there. I mean, in fairness to the assessor, and I don't, for the record, don't know him. I've never met him. He's turning an aircraft carrier, right? It does take time. He got elected I think he assumed office in 2019. You would get reassessed once every 3 years in Cook County. So he's barely getting through one cycle of that. Now, he has said the right things, I think, especially during his election. But, you're looking at, he walked into a system that was still largely on paper. The computer systems and the models he walked into were just wrong. I mean, and had been wrong for years. And he's trying to change a system that's 50 years old. Now, Phil would probably know about, has analyzed the data since then much more than I have. But again, it's just not him too, right? It is still the Board of Review. It's still the Circuit Court. It's still the Property Tax Appeal Board for the state of Illinois. And all of those things are problems.
But John, this is the mistake that he made when he got in there. He was going around to the black community telling us what he couldn't do. But then he went up to NECA and tried to give them a 19% property tax cut based on the floodplain.
That's right. Tracks doctor, that's perfect. That's good.
And it was, if it wasn't for the Board of Review, because the Board of Review stopped it. Okay? Now, I got my problems with the Board of Review because they're just as bad as he is.
I want to get to that, but let me ask you this. If he could give a tax break to with NECA based on a reason that he found necessary, what about the fact that he said, and reports show that certain communities have been impacted by an excessive, why can't he use that as a way to...
He has the power to do it.
Yeah. So
he has the authority to do it.
Well, that's good. I mean, I think that if you guys could give us a difference between what the assessor job is and what the Board of Review job is.
Yeah, because I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Northwestern and Evanston pays no taxes, so we got to pick up the burden of that. Can the assessor or Board of Review change that? Do we have any hope?
That would have to be done by Springfield.
I believe that's the Constitution.
You're looking at the non-profits.
And I think Evanston has one of the
one
rates in Cook County also. So
Yeah, no, that's the Constitution. I believe Northwestern gets their exemption in the Illinois Constitution, so I think that wouldn't be.
That had to be done. That had to be done by.
So the difference between the review and the assessor's office, who has the most power, or is it equal?
I'll probably say it's equal to a degree.
Yeah, no, I mean, well, so think about the Board of Review is like they're the appeals office, right? So the assessor sets the assessments. Board of Review is where you get to go appeal them. So the real, I mean, for the vast majority, I mean, there's 1.8 million parcels in Cook County, I think, somewhere around there. The vast majority of those folks, their life is going to be determined by the assessor's assessment of their property, and then the tax rates, the taxing bodies, et cetera. But mostly the assessor. The folks that are in the know, they go and appeal to the Board of Review. They're going to get some benefit there. But in general, the assessor is the real power. And I think, one solution that's been bantied about for a long time is making the assessor an appointed official rather than having him an elected official. I think there's some merit to that. I mean, there's problems with appointments too. But when you're talking about somebody that has to raise money through political contributions, et cetera, and this is not an indictment of Fritz Kage, it's an indictment of anybody that would hold that office. Like there's a push and pull of politics. I don't know why that we continue to elect that office in particular when we're asking a person to make some very hard changes to make some very powerful people angry. It's tough to do when you have to run for re-election.
But see, we can fix that with what they did out in California with Proposition 13. And I've created our own Proposition 13 called Proposition 2022, where you take the responsibility of assessing your property out of the hands of the assessor, and you put it in our hands, the voters, where we say, okay, this property can be assessed no more than 2%.
So yeah, that's good. I mean, it's very difficult.
Did out in California.
Yeah, it's difficult for the assessor tax doctor to a certain degree. He does have a problem assessing because he really goes off public record. Is that right? Is that the only way the assessor could get an assessment of a property by public record?
Yeah.
So what message do you all give Springfield, the assessor, the Board of Review, to fix this problem? And when I think about it, the show is called Chicago Heal. We know that we need healing in this property property tax arena. And people work very hard to maintain and keep their homes. And if we want Chicago to be strong and healthy, we have to end the foreclosures. We have to make sure that people can afford to stay in their houses by paying their property taxes. Senior citizens need to be able to pay their property taxes, especially when they get reverse mortgages. They may not have anything but and taxes, property taxes that they have to pay. What message do you all give to the taxpayers, property taxpayers? We'll start with you, Phil.
Yeah, sure. I would say that, I don't think that it's like anyone's specific purpose to cause harm to any of our residents. I don't think that this is happening at all in the heart of our assessor or in the hearts of any of our elected officials, especially you, Rep. Ford. But what's happening is because of the system, we're really hurting our eldest members of our population, our least educated members of our population, and those that don't have the means to follow through and hire tax lawyers, etc.
But who created the
we're hurting
system?
them.
That goes back to the Constitution.
So
Okay.
I would
That
say
happened in the
that
Constitution
we,
Convention.
if we want to help those at the lowest end, I think that we need two things. We need better education and outreach to those individuals so that, and maybe what that looks like is like just automatic appeals. Why do they have to file, like fill in some buttons on a form when the township assessor does that anyway? Just talking about the regular
Automatic appeals. That's good. And so your message to the assessor, your message to the board of review, because you gave. What's your message? Because I want to go down the line. We want to make sure that we get messages to all these
automatic appeals for for our regular neighbors in the community, and then consider higher exemption levels to offset this kind of minimum tax that people in the community are paying. That would be another potential thing to consider.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, ultimately, Cook County Board of Review and the Assessor's Office allows people to appeal online now. It's not particularly hard to do, to log on, need to get the word out about that, certainly. But at the end of the day, we need to stop relying on the property tax as the primary way of funding our schools and our governments, right? Cook County needs a fundamental change. We need to shift from the property tax to a progressive income tax, because this problem does not get better. Schools are going to continue to need more money. Even when times are bad, when the economy's bad, property taxes continue to go up. And then a quick solution would be all of the exemptions we have in Cook County, and the doctor and I were talking about this earlier, make them needs-based. We have multi-millionaires that are getting exemptions on their property because they qualify as and not popular to say, they qualify as a senior, but they're multi-millionaires. Why are we giving them a property tax break in their home when they have that kind of money, right? Make it needs-based. There are people that, to your point, Rep. Ford, that are trying to stay in their homes and simply can't. They're choosing between food and paying their property taxes, and then they lose their home because they can't pay their property taxes. You can't do that. Make those exemptions needs-based.
Tax doctor?
The name of your show is Chicago Heal. And one of the things I was looking at that will heal our folks is a property tax cut. And we do have some recommendations. But point that needs to really be driven home is you take one of our senators, the one that's injured, the veteran. She pays no property taxes in Illinois. Okay?
You're saying Senator Duckworth pays no property taxes in Illinois?
Yes.
Okay.
Why? Because one of the legislators in Springfield came up with that exemption for military people, veterans.
Service
connected.
Not that, but disabled veterans.
Yeah, service connected. 70%, 100%. Well, we know she got lots of legs. Okay, but when you think about the income that she's making, $170,000 as a senator, $300-some thousand coming in from royalties from her books. She owns another home that's worth 1.3 million in another state where she pays $16,000.
So without attacking anybody, just tell us how we should fix things.
I will go along with what John just got you saying. It had to be mean tested.
That's great. All right. Here's the other thing. We talk about assessments, but there are more things that make up a tax bill. So I think that you would think that the assessor and the board of review, they're responsible for all of the taxes that we pay as property owners. What makes up a tax bill? Who wants to take that?
That's your schools, your park districts, mosquito abatement, municipalities, special districts, your fire districts, your sanitation districts. We have 7,000 units of government, as the governor pointed out in the State address. We spend $30 billion a year in property taxes. Now, as the governor said to you guys in the State address, it's time to consolidate, liquidate, and reform this system.
Okay, those are the things that people see on their tax bills. Can those be what you call appealed? Can you appeal?
Definitely not.
So
those are legally mandated levies.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, there can be a class action, basically lawsuit to appeal them if there's something wrong with the calculation and the rate. There's been some of those that have happened historically, but no, for the most part, the taxing body says we need this much money. They look at your assessment, they factor in, what amount you have to pay based on that levy and the value of your home, and that's it.
Is it possible?
All continue to go out.
Is it possible that taxpayers in black and brown communities could have a class action lawsuit because they feel less safe, and they feel that their services are not equal to those that Is that a class action lawsuit? You're an attorney, John Sullivan.
Yes, but certainly not my area of expertise. Class action lawsuits.
You brought it up.
I would say I would probably say not, because there was a class action lawsuit brought by the South Suburban Housing Center. There's two other communities that was involved, and when KG went into the courts, he told the judge that he instituted this new system, and so the judge dismissed the lawsuit. Now, our biggest problem here in Cook County and the state of Illinois is the fact that we have 856 school districts. That's where 60 to 70% of your taxes go, is to these school districts. Now, before the pandemic, we had 2,075,000 students. After the pandemic, we now down to 1,887,000 students. Chicago had 400,000 students. They are now down to 330,000 students. We're losing students every day. We're losing populations every day. And if we're going to change this system, again, it goes back to the schools. We don't need 856 school districts.
Yeah. Okay. That's across the board. That's across the board.
Across the board. And this is what's driving these property taxes. It's these school districts.
Okay, we know that's a part of the problem. The school districts, they're not going away. They're not going away. It's 852 school districts across the state. It's very important.
We got to consolidate.
Okay, let's deal with that, tax doctor. Okay. Consolidating all the school districts, people move to Winnetka so that they could have. They're willing to pay more property taxes. They want their.
That's fine, because they willing to pay more property taxes. But the bottom line is this: when the schools first start getting money to pay for the schools and the teachers, that was in 1819, when the state shifted the burden of running the schools over to the townships. Then the townships gave the schools over to municipalities.
Yeah.
If the state would have dealt with that position of Article 10, Section 1, education is free, which means the state is responsible for funding education statewide. And that's why when the business people took the state to court,
Okay,
The
we
court
we,
told
we,
the state-
we can't go over all the litigation. Go ahead, Malika.
Another complaint I hear up on the North Shore is how our local city officials up there, how they budget. So if they don't manage the budget right, then they say, okay, then we just raise property taxes. That's always the go-to, always. So apparently, it's more than the system, it's just how they feel.
Yeah, it's more than you know
It's
what.
more than the system.
Well, let me say this, Malika. It seems to me when we did our race-based initiative for the tax relief for Illinois, we went way back to, from slavery to now. Somehow black people end up gentrified, foreclosed, wiped out TIF money. So when the smoke clears, we end up being the burden of a whole thing that's taking money from us and giving it to the rich. And that's where we are on racism. Racism.
And with that, that's Reven Fellows' final remarks. We're going to go for closing remarks. We have 1 minute. We'll go to John Sullivan for closing. Then we go to Phil Griffin, and then we have a tax doctor, and then we go right to our Malika, and then I'll close.
I just want to thank you both. It's such an important conversation. These are complicated issues, but there are solutions to them, and I really thank you for highlighting them. We need to all work together to ensure a fair property tax system, and that we shift the burden off of our homeowners.
Yeah, thank you guys all. I totally agree with John. This is a huge issue and it affects everybody. I think in the near term, we need to help educate our neighbors, our elderly neighbors, our less fortunate neighbors, and help them appeal in the near term. This is something we can do right now. And then, in the longer term, certainly working on consolidating school districts and shifting toward a more progressive income tax would make this whole issue much less important.
Tax doctor?
if I can recommend to both of you, and matter of fact, everybody, go to Google and put in equalizing school funding and the 1970 Constitutional Convention. And when you get this copy, read the whole 5-page report. But page three is most important because one of the delegates at the convention tried to do one-upmanship on Dunn Clark Mitch because she wanted the state to fund education at a 90% percentile. The other delegate...
We got one, we got to close out.
All right. The other delegate said, hey, let the state pay 100% and let's not have property tax.
Thank you, Lika.
All right. Well, I want to thank you all so much. I learned so much from Phil today and Attorney Sullivan and from the tax doctor. And I look forward to us having further discussion this weekend because I've learned something from each one of you. Most definitely, yes.
And this is LaShawn Ford. Thank you for being on with us. And one thing I know is equitable assessment is possible, and anything else is unacceptable. This has been Chicago Hill. We thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Have a good evening. Happy holidays, everyone.